Welcome to the Brewing Wellness Podcast, nourishing UFT members, one conversation at a time. Brewing Wellness is a podcast created by the UFT Member Assistance Program to support the mental health and well-being of our members. In order to do the work you do every day and be present for your loved ones, students, and patients, your cup has to be full. Brewing Wellness focuses on mental health and wellness topics that can help us all thrive in our professional and personal lives. We'll be releasing a new episode on the last Monday of each month. Remember to listen to the Brewing Wellness Podcast wherever you get your podcasts. And please, don't forget to subscribe. Now, let's get started.
Hello, and welcome back to the Brewing Wellness Podcast, hosted by the UFT Member Assistance Program. Hello, my name is Julia Moore, and I am an occupational therapist and an assistive technology evaluator. Today, I'm joined by Julia De Giacomo, licensed clinical social worker with the UFT Member Assistance Program. Well, we made it through January, and we will close out the month. Hopefully, we are all still focused on meeting our personal goals and kicking off 2025 on a good foot. As we move into February, a month that tends to be focused less on our individual goals and more on our connection with others, we want to talk about what seems to be a trending topic right now: attachment styles and love languages. You may have heard these terms in other podcasts. You might have seen some information on it on your social media feeds. You might have even picked up a book on the topic. But what do these terms really mean? Join us as we delve deep with Julia into some of the topics and get a better understanding of what these terms mean. But before we begin, Julia, how are you?
I'm well, thank you. Thank you for joining me in this podcast.
Well, thank you for having me. I mentioned earlier that you're a clinician with the UFT Member Assistance Program. Can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and the work that you do?
Yes, in addition to working with the UFT Members Assistance Program and providing short-term counseling and workshops to the members, I also run a private practice where I see families, couples, individuals, and I supervise. I'm a clinical supervisor for another program, and I offer my assistance to her that way. I would like to also add that I've been a social worker for over 25 years, and most of my history or my experience has been working with women that have serious mental illness along with dual diagnoses and have had long histories of trauma.
Wow, thank you for that length of service, 25 years. Awesome. Well, let's start with attachment styles. Our listeners may or may not have heard about them. So can you explain exactly what attachment styles are and how they are formed?
Yes. Attachment styles are essentially patterns of behaviors and interactions that indicate or demonstrate the way we are emotionally bonded with others or our psychological connection to others. And they are usually formed, they are formed in early childhood between the relationship between infant and caregiver. So there are essentially 4 types of attachment styles, but within that, there's also subtypes. But usually there's a secure attachment style, and then there are 3 that are considered to be insecure attachment styles, and those would be anxious or ambivalent. Those words are used interchangeably, avoidant, and disorganized. And I want to tell you a little bit more about how that develops. I do want to also say that although they originate in early childhood and the relationship between infant and caregiver influences the way we attach as adults and our adult attachment style, there are also other things like temperament and the experiences that we have as adolescents and as adults as we go into young adulthood that affect those attachment styles. And we can change how we attach to others. So therefore, someone who has struggles with an insecure attachment style can morph into a more secure attachment style as they get older, as they become more evolved, or as they get into better relationships with people who have a different way to behave towards them, and as they become their own advocate for learning what they need. So I do want to say, if you are struggling with an insecure attachment style, you don't have to stay there forever.
So basically, you're saying that it dependent on experiences post the initial attachment that could also influence your attachment style for the individual.
What I'm saying is that as infants, we are sort of reliant on our relationship with our caregiver for survival. So if we'll develop a secure attachment if our caregiver is responsive to our needs, if they give us validation without punishment, if they make us feel safe, seen, heard, understood, then we will develop and create a sense of self that is secure, and then we will be able to attach to others in a very secure way and not struggle with fears of abandonment or stuff like that. But if our caregiver is inconsistent, then we would develop what's considered to be more of an anxious or ambivalent sort of attachment style. So what that means is we will be reluctant to attach to others, to seek out relationships with others. We will really struggle with the separation from others. If a relationships end, we will be devastated. We will constantly seek reassurance from our partners because we don't believe that we're loved the way we love. So that's kind of an anxious attachment style. So that's how it shows up as an adult, and how it shows up as a child is that we will be very scared when our parents leave us, and we may not be comforted when they return, which is different than a person with a secure attachment style, because every child goes into distress when they separate from their parents. But in a secure attachment style, when the parent returns, that's a comfort to the child. But in somebody who's anxiously attached, even when the parent returns, they are still anxious about the parent leaving again. I hope that makes sense. Yeah.
Well, now I just was seeking clarification on what are the styles and what are the major signs for each style, because you've mentioned them, but what are you've given us 2 examples. So what are the signs for each style?
Yeah. So the secure attachment style is in childhood. Like I said, they will seek comfort from their parent. They will look to be close to their parent. If their parent leaves and the parent returns, that's enough to comfort them, right? And as adults, they will seek out long-term, lasting, fulfilling relationships. They will trust their partners. Jealousy is not usually part of the picture. They have no problem having a separate self and also attaching to someone else. They won't feel like they need to break off the attachment in order to have their separate self, okay? Anxious attachment style, as a child, if your parent leaves you, you are in distress, but then you're not comforted when your parents return, right? And as an adult, you are reluctant to form those attachments to others. And even when you do form them, you are always seeking reassurance that your partner loves you, because you don't trust that your partner loves you as much as you love them. And if the relationship ends, it's devastating to you, much more so than, like everybody's upset, but for someone with an anxious attachment style, it's just like devastating. Then we have the avoidant attachment style, where as children, they don't seek out comfort or engagement with their parents. A parent or a stranger makes no difference to them. Like they don't have any real attachment to someone. So in their adult relationships, they also will not invest emotionally. They avoid intimacy. These are the ones that we consider commitment phobic, or they have a hard time making a commitment to somebody. Even if they have a relationship, they will run away. They will feel like when they feel a lot of pressure when they have to give emotionally to someone, so that will end up causing them to break up the relationship, okay? And then there's something called disorganized attachment style, which we see with children who have gone through serious neglect or trauma, or there's a real inconsistency in the parenting, but much more so than Like in anxious attachment style, it's also inconsistent, but in anxious attachment style, it's more about the parent is not maybe attuned to the child, but in disorganized attachment style, there's a sense in which the parent is both a sense of comfort and fear. So then the child becomes very apprehensive and very confused, and they don't know how to process that. So in their adult relationships, they would be a combination of both anxious and avoidant, right? So they will try to attach. They're always looking for love, but they fear love. So the minute they get close to love, those are the ones that'll pick a fight over anything just because they want to separate and they want to sabotage the relationship because they are afraid that this person will either reject them or hurt them. Similarly to what I'm essentially trying to point out is that the relationship we have with our caregivers heavily influences the way we attach as adults, but that even with that, we can change because it can be somebody, let's just say, who had a very secure upbringing, who has a secure attachment style as a child, but then they grow up and maybe they get rejected by the first partner, the second partner, the third partner. Then by that point, they're going to develop an insecure attachment style and they will exhibit all those symptoms even though they started out secure as a child and vice versa, right?
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
I hope that was a good understanding.
Yeah, that was very clear. So attachment styles pretty much sound like the way we approach attachments. How does this differ from common phrases or love language?
Well, love languages are really the way we give and receive love. Okay, how we're comfortable giving and receiving love. This is Dr. Gary Chapman did this work, and there is a love language profile that everyone can take to figure out what their love language is. And there are 5 essential types. One is quality time. So basically, either you like to give all of your time and dedication to someone when you love them, or you want to be given all of their time and dedication. So basically that means, turning the phone down, shutting the phone down, turning off the TV, focusing intently on your partner, right? Acts of service is when you relieve your burdens from your partner, or you want your burdens relieved. So it's either way. It's how you give and receive love, right? So you'll do the dishes, maybe. You'll cook a meal after your partner has had a hard day. You'll maybe run that UPS package to the UPS store for them so they don't have to do it. You'll pick up the kids from school. You'll clean the house. Those are acts of service, right? You'll put gas in the car, so on and so forth. Physical touch is you feel the most loved or you like to give love by kissing, hugging, touching. Sexual intimacy is very important in those types of connections. And then, so we have quality time, acts of service, physical touch, receiving gifts, right? And words of affirmation. So receiving gifts is just that. You like to receive gifts or you like to give gifts when you're trying to express your love. And words of affirmation are that you want to be told a lot of I love yous. You want to be constantly complimented and praised, or you like to compliment and praise. Written word has a lot to do here. So like somebody like that would love to receive a love letter from their partner or give a love letter to their partner. So love languages are the way we give and receive love, and attachment styles are the way we create those bonds and connections with people. And what I'm going to say is if you know where you stand with both and you know where your partner stands with both, then you can really mitigate a lot of the challenges that we often see in relationships, and it can enhance the intimacy and the communication and the connection.
Wow, that's a lot of good information on both attachment styles and love language. How can we take all of this information and apply them to the relationships in our lives?
I think, like I said, it's essential. I think it's pretty essential to understand how you attach to people, what your preferred love language is, like have all of that insight about yourself, and then also have those deep conversations with your partner. Like, what is their attachment style? How did they grow up? This is why it's so important. Like, what are some of their vulnerabilities, right? And how do they like to receive love? ironically, I do want to say that what I see always in my practice is usually somebody with a anxious attachment style gets attracted to somebody with an avoidant attachment style, and they just trigger each other all the time, right? Because the anxious person wants to be reassured, and the more they seek that reassurance, the more the avoidant person wants to get away from this person, right? And the more they want to get away, the more the anxious person is going to chase them. So it's interesting, right? And it creates a very unhealthy dynamic. But if you know that your style is you're getting anxious, right? And maybe that can help you mitigate and watch your own anxiety so that you don't project it onto your partner. And vice versa. If that partner is avoidant, but they know that those behaviors just escalate your anxiety, then maybe they can mitigate that and you can kind of meet in the middle.
Wow. That's interesting how the two opposites tend to attract, but not necessarily maintain a whole cohesive because of the different styles. Well, it's not always looking inward at these dynamics. What would you suggest for anyone who may be struggling with their relationship or struggling to understand how to manage their attachment difficulties?
Well, I do want to repeat that they're not fixed, so that if you are struggling, they can change, okay? I would recommend that, of course, I'm going to recommend that anybody who is struggling with their attachment and is feeling distressed about it, seek some psychotherapy to dive in, or couples counseling, or whatever they feel most comfortable with. But there is something they can look at. If they're really interested, they can look up John Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth. John Bowlby was the father of attachment theory. And then there is also something that's called the adult attachment interview or the adult attachment projection, which is usually performed by a psychologist, so they can look into that. And then Gary Chapman is the leader. There's a book, there's a workbook on the love languages, and there's also a love language profile that anybody can take online. So it just could give you a sense of, it's a fun activity to do with your partner too. It's a great way. I work with some of this in my couples counseling. I use it. I always bring in these theories and these techniques, and it helps. It helps people come together.
I've done the profile a couple of times, and I keep forgetting, so I have to go back and check mine. But it is fun. It is very interesting. And of course, we only have a limited time on this podcast. But for those who might want to now delve deeper into all of these things, do you have any other recommended sources for the audience?
So it's like I said, I mean, they can certainly do their research into John Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth. They were the leaders in attachment theory, mostly John Bowlby, but then Mary added to some things about it. And they can certainly look into getting an adult attachment interview or an adult attachment projection. And look up Gary Chapman for the love languages. It's definitely a place to start. And always look into therapy, couples counseling or long-term therapy. I mean, if it's more than one person that you're struggling with your attachment, then that really, you have to do some deep work there. I would recommend that.
Well, thank you, Julia, for your time, and thank you for educating us on attachment styles.
Thank you. Take care.
Once again, thank you for joining us for this episode of the Brewing Wellness Podcast, brought to you by the UFT Member Assistance Program to support the mental health and well-being of our members. If you are a UFT member, the Member Assistance Program can be reached at 212-701-9620 or by emailing mapinfo@uft.org. And once again, please don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for listening.